Thank you, Sami.
Now, this is actually really funny because this morning is Tour de Europe because I'm from Finland. So, but I've been in the States for 12 years, and I'm American now. So, so it was very interesting to listen to the two speakers before. What we've done at Wolters Kluwer Health and Medical Research particularly is a lot of that, figuring out what the hell is going on, particularly in our print subscription space. And I run the marketing and customer services, but I also have the print subscription business rolling up to me. And you can imagine what kind of meetings I'm having with our CEOs and top executives. It's like, okay, so explain me why is the print declining again 10, 15, 20%, whatever the number is, pick any. And about a year ago, the answer was like, well, we think they're moving to electronic because the electronic's growing and the print's going down, so there's got to be some movement. But our CEO is very numbers driven, so she was always like, prove it to me. And thus we started our project on the analytics and big data. So like we heard before, a lot of us are heavy on data and a little bit light on insights. So this is the problem. So I have an analytics team, and we're really good, and our finance team, they're really, really good at reporting back on facts. But then when we ask them, so what's behind this? Why is this happening? What can we do about it? Then it's much more complicated conversation. And it's interesting how the same people can actually convert in the span of 6 months. They've actually moved entirely into the insights. Like, the numbers are given, so here they are, but now let's talk about what it matters. And a lot of this is because of the legacy business systems we have. We have one of our subscription management system. I'm convinced that it's built in COBOL or something in mainframe age, because the reports we get are absolutely horrendous. So every time we get something, people need to work on that and make it useful. We had issues with matching individual and institutional users. I'm sure if you're selling to institutions, you probably have IP authentication to those customers. And guess what? We don't know if it's one person using something 1,000 times or 1,000 people using it one time. And this is one of those, big issues that we're trying to crack and figuring out who those individuals might be so that we can market them better and do usage and so forth. And then, of course, things like understanding the user behavior, figuring out what goes on on the websites, on the tablets. We sell advertising in our print business, and convincing advertisers that digital engagement is better than a print ad is very confusing and complicated. I don't know. Well, you should help us actually there. Every time the conversation goes, it's like, well, digital bundle, people do this, that, and the other, and they're like, well, how much circulation do you have on the print again? Because that's how we're deciding on how much we're going to spend with it. Frustrating. So, how are we going to go from there? So one of the things, obviously, was for us particularly was that we needed to look at the data. And it's everybody, I think, agrees that data is a complex beast. We have very few people in the company typically who really understand what's in the systems from a technical view. And then we need to match it with the business view, is what kind of questions do we need to ask? And these were actually real pictures from our system. So we do tons in pivot tables. We do tons of work in Excel, you can imagine. And then this little chart here is actually a report that comes out of our billing system for one of our subscription systems. And that's why I was convinced that we are in an old mainframe or something, because it looks like dot matrix printers, space delimited. The only way you can look at it reasonably is in TextPad on a PC. If you open it in Excel, it looks like crap. So that was a pretty nasty situation. And of course, you can imagine how much time we spend manually figuring things out. So what we started doing was that with our CEO, well, I already said she's very numbers driven. So what we really started working on was modeling the data, but also figuring out how to tell the stories. And again, it's it's one thing to say we have opportunities in a country. X thousand potential customers we could sell, institutions in this case. But once you actually drop them on a map, people start getting it's like, okay, so Northeast, California, yeah, kind of makes sense. Let me see where they are exactly. So telling the stories on that. But the key for us was to really create actionable insights. And I'll talk about 3 of the examples we've done. And I have to put the optimized marketing spend everywhere because our CFO keeps on beating me on like, what are you getting out of that? We spend a lot of money on subscription individuals and institutions, and it's the same story as always. 50% of my marketing isn't working, but I don't know which part of it. And it was actually an interesting story. I just read yesterday in the plane, Adobe has done a marketing survey around these topics, and there were two numbers that I remember because they were so silly. On one hand, 76% of marketers in the United States said that they have to be more numbers-driven in their decision-making, and they are already. But then 49% of the same people said that they make their marketing decisions and budget and vehicles and things like that based on their gut. So it was like, okay, so there are about 25% of the people who are either lying or dreaming or something. But anyway, so we got to get better. So we started with three really key problems for us. And well, one was the really key problem, and the two were opportunities we figured out we could get some money out. So one was the print to electronic transition. Anybody have a problem with that, knowing who's dropping, where they're going? I can promise you we had. Then turn-away list is something that everybody, I think everybody who sells subscriptions sells seats versus site licenses are looking at those things, and then the white space for institutions particularly. So from print to electronic, and by the way, my apologies, the two charts with actual numbers are blurry on purpose, because I realized that we actually may have some competitors in the room, so I had to hide some of the numbers. But I promise that they are from our dashboard pulled yesterday morning, actually. So what we were looking at when we built this dashboard and a view of the market was we wanted to see essentially where our total space is for our journals business particularly, how it breaks across various buckets of revenue. Then we wanted to, we went to look at the what are the different attrition buckets we have. So people who had print and electronic are dropping print, moving to electronic only. What goes on there, and then where are they specifically? The pie chart then shows where they were geographically, and then we could look at the various categories. And then when we look at the various categories, we can actually see which accounts are behind this category. We've had stories, I've heard anecdotal stories, and now we have facts where somebody said, oh yeah, that's that account. We used to give them 80% discount on the online platform because they had such a huge print holdings. So, okay, great. Now they dropped all of the print. Did we increase their price? That's a good idea. We should actually probably go back and try to do something about that. So we figured out things like that, and what we're doing now is that we are constantly loading the data into Salesforce.com for our sales reps. So our online subscription service sales reps, they know exactly what's going on in the print holdings, and if something's shifting, they can adjust the conversation with the customers as well. And the best thing ever is that the logic behind this is so complex that even the finance department, they're like, it's got to be right because we can't prove it wrong, which is brilliant. The other option, the thing what we did was really interesting was looking at the turnaways, and this is the dashboard on the top. It was a quick hack to see. I assume everybody knows what turnaways are, right? So we sell site license, but we only have one concurrent user for a journal, for instance, and then when the second person comes in, they get a not so pleasant error message, which is like you don't have access to this right now. Try again later. When this happens a lot, the users end up going to the librarian and complain. And what the librarian usually don't realize is that they could buy additional seats for next to nothing. A couple of $100, $300, $400, $500. They could easily upgrade their access. So what we did was we looked at this and we again loading into Salesforce.com for our reps, because our reps, they like to be prescriptive, so we give them exactly what they need. And the bottom picture, I don't know if you can see it, but in the bottom picture is an example from the opportunity on Salesforce.com where we said, all right, for this account, they have these journals, they have these many turnaways, and if you sold them one extra seat or two extra seats for a discount, this is what the end result is going to be. So better service for their end users and an easy revenue. We did this, we launched this initially in December last year, which is kind of a nasty timing for the renewal season. But we still made about $100,000 in incremental revenue, just like easy pickings. Some of the deals were $200, some of them were $8,000-9,000, so depending on the size of the client. And now we continue doing this so that we're serving this data really easily to our salespeople so that they can continue working on this upsell opportunity. The third piece where we started looking was, again, the visualization. And this has to do a lot about the territory planning, where we put our field salespeople. So we looked at our market where we have people who are pure prospects who never had anything from us, or had things like they had print subscriptions for the institutions or individuals in certain markets, and then where we didn't have our online platform. And then we looked at it just putting bullets on the map. In the U.S., this works great from a state perspective. In Europe, we're looking at countries and counties, depends on where we are. But we can also look at densities. So that's, again, it's a kind of giving a picture to the executive team saying that here's the density of opportunities within the United States. And we can immediately see that do we have reps in Michigan or Wisconsin or wherever, and how far are they from the potential prospects versus customers and so forth. So it's a much easier way to communicate the information rather than going to the spreadsheets and look at the 600 rows of data and figuring out how to filter it. So I figured out, because I'm a little geeky too, and I'm actually the one who has a search engine at home, because I'm not very good at organizing. I'm exactly the opposite from a librarian in my staff. The librarian is perfect. Everything is super organized. My way of organizing is dump it all on a bunch of hard drives and then put a search engine on top of it so you can find it. So what we did, so I figured I'll show you a little bit about how we built the system, and feel free to ask any questions afterwards. I'm happy to share the learnings we had. But we use Amazon heavily, and one of the big reasons why we use Amazon is cost, but it's also the fact that our IT department had a little hard time responding to our requirements. So when I was like, I need a server, the answer was, well, get in the line, get a ticket, and then eventually we'll tell you how much it's going to cost, and it'll take time to provision it and everything else. Then I spoke to one of our engineers, and he was like, yeah, we have a deal in Amazon. You just, you don't even have to use a credit card. Just tell them that you need a server, and 5 minutes later, we have a server up and running. So that allowed us to do this project much, much faster than any other way. And it's big data for us. We have about 2 terabytes of data right now in Amazon. In the grand scheme of things, this is tiny data. But for us, it's kind of really big. I think we have the biggest table is probably 225 million rows around individuals. So it is something that is quite valuable. And for the visualization, we use a tool called Tableau for most part, which is, I don't know if you've ever seen it. All the pictures before you saw the pretty stuff is actually built on that. And it's a nice tool because we can also give access to the executives, particularly an iPad. So we can give them these nice dashboards with the drop-down menus. They can filter. So we don't always need to produce the reports for them. They can go themselves and say, how is that product line doing? Well, use the drop-down. How is that territory going? Well, use the drop-down, and you get the numbers. And they're always real-time because they are the actual numbers at most 24 hours late when the data gets refreshed from our back-office systems. And what's in the future? So one of the things we're still working on is we have 2 major platforms where the usage is still separate. So we're the main online platform, we get all the usage over already on our journals platform where we house most of our specific our LWW journals. That is still slightly there. It's being brought over. We're matching the end users. This has been a massive work for us because you can imagine that a nurse, even in the United States, can exist in our system 6 or 7 times easily. And they may have slightly different email addresses, slightly different physical addresses, slightly different telephone numbers, IP, everything. So we've spent a lot of effort in actually matching it so that we can create the one master. And we're something like 90+% in matching rates right now with our internal efforts on creating the rules. So this is something which is really critical for us so that from a marketing perspective, I can now start communicating more to the end user who are linked to institutions particularly and figure out who's the buyer versus the user and tweak the message. The third bullet is super critical for us. As you can imagine, probably with you guys as well, the renewals is a lifeline of our business. So understanding on what is the likelihood, the propensity to renew or propensity to cancel is absolutely critical. And there are a lot of interesting hypotheses that we're testing them right now is, for instance, if an impact factor of a journal is changing, does that correlate somehow to the potential cancellation of a subscription later in the year? Is it the usage? Is it the cost per download? Is it the number of calls we get to tech support? Is it the absence of calls to tech support? Is it the number of trainings we provide to the users and so forth? So there are a lot of variables that we're trying to bring together and figure out what is the most likely reason. And of course, to make these things worse, it's incredibly different in Middle East from Asia to Europe. And in Europe, we can break into something like 4 clusters easily, and they all operate slightly differently. The fourth bullet has to do more about giving the data to our technology platform so that they can recommend content for our users. So it's something that if somebody goes on our OvidSP platform and runs a search on a specific topic, it would be fantastic if we could recommend them a little bit like the Amazon. You know, our users are very much like Amazon, Google babies. So give me some recommendations. You know, what else could I do? And to do that effectively, it requires a lot of data, which then needs to get consolidated to a degree so that we can deliver the recommendations on the fly. So that's something that we're working with our engineering right now. And then optimize operations. So I'm dying to cut back on the number of direct mail, particularly. We sent last year, my team sent almost 10 million pieces of print direct mail around the world. We spent over 270 million emails. So the numbers are just staggering. So you can imagine if I can cut 10 or 20 or 30% of this, it's going to be fantastic. And a lot has to do around just the data and being able to access it. So, for instance, we have right now a scoring project going on where we're looking at what is the most likely channel to communicate to somebody and they will get a response. So that I don't want to send print direct mail to anybody who doesn't respond. If they never respond, I don't want to send it to them. But if they never respond to anything, I don't want to send them anything, you know, because they're probably, you know, people who don't care about our stuff. But I want to double down on things that work. And without having easy access to this kind of data, it's practically impossible. We're just shooting in the dark. And we continue just testing, and it's hard to read the results. So that's roughly what's going on. And I think we're doing relatively okay with the timing, too, for Q&A.
Excellent. Thank you, Sami.